Hello. Agreed Ushla. Son common Irish done a foracle kuna boahium fear queen for Charcoal Road Villiers. On behalf of the Donapatrick Kuna Heritage Society, I want to say you're very welcome to tonight's presentation. We have two very eminent, I don't know, could you call them scholars? They have passed the scholars gauge, I think, at this stage. Dr. Jessica Cooke, first class honours degree in TCD and PhD from the University of Cambridge. She gave some wonderful talks over the last couple of years, particularly one on our local saint, St. Connacht. And she has, I'm not too sure what you call it, a bean or bonnet about Knockma, but I'm really looking forward to what she has helped us to find out about Knockma tonight, and showing us what was found, hopefully. Dr. Paul Naessens, who's PhD in archaeology, and his wonderful machine that you can see here is what he has flown over Knockma to see can he uncover some of the secrets. When I was a young fella, I used to do a little bit of work with my uncle over in Paul Naessens, and every day for diet we had Knockma. We had hares and hounds and horses in no particular order, but I'm wondering, did he uncover any skeletons of anything down there underneath? So, without any further ado, you don't want to be listening to me. First of all, you have Dr. Jessica Cooke.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you. Let me see if I can put this thing down. Yeah, good. So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming this evening on such a wet evening to the Donapatrick Kilcoona Heritage Society presentation for Heritage Week 2024. And also thank you to Cairns GAA Club for allowing us to use the community hall, which is great. I've never been in here before and it's lovely. Now, before I hand you over to Dr. Paul Naessens of Western Aerial Surveys to talk about the LiDAR survey he has made of Knockma, I want to preface this with a little context about how we came to study this amazing hill. And as you can see, we are also going to be treated to a montage of the beautiful photographs taken during this period by artist and poet Claire Loader of key features in the Knockma landscape, which is a wonderful record from this royal and ritual complex. So, back in the spring of this year, Tom Craddock, Claire Loader and myself, together with Irene McGoldrick, chair of the Anadam Heritage Society, hit on the notion that we might apply for a heritage community grant to commission a LiDAR survey, a method of remote detection to examine the surface of Knockma Hill, here in East County Galway. And as everyone here knows, Knockma is in the backyard of the Donapatrick Kilcoona Heritage Society, which has for so many years promoted and protected the history and natural landscape of the hill. In particular, the Society has concerns about quarrying, which has been burrowing away into the eastern side of the Knockma landscape, potentially threatening unexamined and sometimes undocumented archaeology in its way. So that's the Society. I, on the other hand, am a research scholar in medieval studies. I'm affiliated to the Centre for Antique, Medieval and Pre-Modern Studies at the University of Galway. And I've been studying the early history of Morshola, or the Barony of Clare, for the past 15 years now, and publishing my results on subjects such as the O'Flaherty Kings of Connacht or West Connacht, the medieval saints of Morshola, including St. Brendan, St. Fursa, St. Cooke, and also on the architecture and sculpture of the monastic complex at Annadown, the chief church and bishopric of the district. So you might say that the early barony of Clare is my muse. And in studying it, I venture into many disciplines such as history, archaeology, genealogy, mythology, and literature. And you might say, that's a good way to become a sort of a jack of all trades and a master of none. But yeah, that seems to be where I find myself. What soon became clear to me was that the focal point of Morshola, in terms of archaeology, landscape, politics, and religion, is the Knockma area. Each of the prehistoric and medieval tuatha, or small kingdoms in ancient Ireland, had a royal and ritual centre, and Knockma was the centre for the kingdom of Connacht, or West Connacht, which was located here in the barony of Clare. It's easy to forget that it was only in the 13th century, after the Anglo-Norman de Burgos expelled the O'Flahertys across Lough Corrib, did Connemara exclusively become known as West Connacht. So, even though Knockma is littered with cairns, burial kists, a royal crannóg, enclosures, standing stones, ringforts, early Christian monasteries, and castles, amongst other archaeology, its landscape has never been studied as a whole. So I got to work trawling through medieval Irish literature, annals and genealogies, saints' lives, bardic poetry, place name poetry, folklore, old maps and estate records for references to the hill, but also to the plain and to the lake. Just as Knockma marks the eastern limit of the kingdom of Morshola, the eastern shore of Lough Corrib marks its western edge. And for this reason, I've been communicating with Trevor Northage, whose extraordinary project mapping the lake bed of the Corrib has revealed so many prehistoric and medieval sunken boats, and he has truly turbocharged the field of Irish underwater archaeology. So if you think of it this way, you have a ritual site on the top of Knockma, and then at the other edge of Morshola you have what appears to be some sort of ritual activity going on with the boats, the sunken boats, along the eastern shore of Lough Corrib. Thirdly, and with the invaluable expertise of Kevin Monaghan and Irene McGoldrick, I have been dipping my toes into the genetic evidence for the Ivruin kingship of Knockma, which from the 10th century was held by the O'Flaherty family. Medieval Ireland did not have a tradition of written pedigrees commemorating the bloodline of Irish kings, as they do for royalty elsewhere in Europe. In Ireland, it was the bards who memorised the king's family tree, and with the demise of the bardic class, this memory was largely lost. This is why male DNA analysis is such a valuable new tool, allowing us to test families bearing the name O'Flaherty or one of its variants. O'Flahertys who live in the environs of Knockma and with strong oral memory linking them to the medieval kingship. And in case that wasn't enough, fourthly, I've also been dipping my toes into the science of archaeoastronomy to understand the way in which the prehistoric farming community who built the great cairns on Knockma would have understood and commemorated cosmological events such as the summer and winter solstices and spring and autumn equinoxes. For these Neolithic and Bronze Age peoples, seasonal changes were of paramount and even religious importance. So, while pursuing these different aspects of Knockma, I'm aware that in modern times the hill has mostly been known as the home of Finvarra, king of the fairies in Connacht. Certainly in the 19th century, this is what Knockma was famous for in the writings of people like William Wilde and Douglas Hyde. Finvarra was said to have seduced human women, battled with the she of other fairy mounds in Ireland, and won horse races in the Castle Hacket Fair. In older mythology, Finvarra was the son of the Dagda, the king of the Tuatha Danann. And intriguingly, there is a geological rationale for the subterranean chambers of Finvarra's palace. Just as Thomas was mentioning Paul Naessens, in Paul Naessens townland, on the southwestern skirt of Knockma, lies the opening to an extensive cave system in the limestone, which is filled with fine white quartz sand. White quartz was a sacred stone for prehistoric people, reflecting light as it does, or sparking when struck. And it was often used in the raising of tombs and other monuments. You can think of the front of Newgrange as it is restored with all the white quartz on it. So, chatting about all of this to Tom and Claire and Irene over the last couple of years, it became clear that a detailed overall map of the monuments and contours of this landscape was needed if we were to understand its entirety. I mean, there's only so many times you can go, did you see that weird hole in the ground that was on that hill? No, not that hill, the other hill. You can only do that for so long. Fun as it is. Likewise, the best way to protect the monuments of this ceremonial landscape would be to record and promote them. But this would be difficult, in particular, whilst aerial surveys by drone or plane are useful for bare landscapes. Knockma has been heavily forested since the early 19th century. In addition, many of its monuments, which were recorded by the Ordnance Survey of the 1830s, have since been destroyed or ploughed out. So it seemed that a LiDAR survey was our best hope, because once LiDAR data has been processed, it can sometimes reveal features no longer visible to the naked eye. So I had met Paul Naessens at the university years ago. Paul's PhD in the archaeology department was concerned with the O'Flaherty Lords of Connemara, and he now operates his own remote surveying business, Western Aerial Surveys. And he seems to be much in demand, very successful, and nonetheless we were very, very pleased that he was keen to perform this survey when we asked him. So, last spring, the Donapatrick Kilcoona Heritage Society and I combined forces to apply to the Heritage Council Community Grant Scheme for the funds to engage Paul to perform the survey. And we were absolutely delighted when we learned that our application was successful. And Paul duly sent up drones to capture the imagery. And it's clear from what he's shown us that there is enough imagery of Knockma to study for months and years to come. So, without further delay, I'm delighted now to introduce you to Paul, who will tell you all about it. Thank you so much.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me speak here, and thank you to Jessica, Claire and Irene for all the help they've given me with the survey when we did get going with the survey. I think the background to this, I actually work full-time for acres in the Department of Agriculture, and I run the biggest drone program, probably survey program in Europe. We have 32 pilots, so this is very much my hobby rather than my day job at this stage. I'm contracted with the department until retirement now at this stage. But the background to this, as Jessica said, is that she applied for funding to do a LiDAR survey of the Hill of Knockma in the spring. Now, unfortunately, it's a fault of the Heritage Council system in a way that they give the grants for work like mine just when all the growth comes, so that we don't get to survey in the winter, which is the ideal time to survey. Instead, we have to survey in the summer when you've got this huge overburden of leaves. So I would manage my expectations if I was you on what we were able to see through in terms of the trees and what we've discovered. The good news is we did get quite good penetration through the tree canopy. The better news is there's a better camera coming out at the moment than the one we used, and we'll have access to that in the autumn. And we've already agreed we're going to come back and we're going to resurvey the hill in the winter when there are no leaves there. So we get a lovely clean model then. But I'm very happy with what we have at the moment. To me, it seems to be reasonably good. Now, your expectations in terms of finding new monuments, I would manage them as well, because the sappers, if you want to call them the sappers from the Ordnance Survey in the 1830s, were very thorough, particularly in areas that would you consider to be, if you like, civilized rather than the bogs or the mountains. And they would have recorded every monument that was visible at the time. So we would have probably lost rather than having an expectation maybe to gain monuments. But what LiDAR does is it does give us a greater overview and sometimes helps us to find greater patterns in the landscape. And it also then gives us a snapshot of the hill in time. Now, most people only use LiDAR as a sort of a photograph or a snapshot. So what I'm doing tonight is I'm taking a slightly different approach. I don't know if you know the expression, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. That's what you do if you give somebody a picture of LiDAR. They look at it, everyone says, oh, that's wonderful, pretty picture, whatever, and they go away. I prefer the idea of giving you the fishing rod, if you like, so that you can support yourself for life, or that there's value going on in this. Or as the expression I heard before was, give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. Give him a fishing rod and he'll get out from under your feet for the whole weekend. It's a different one. But anyway, so what I'm doing tonight is, in a way, it's a combination of presenting pictures and showing you the way we did the survey, but also, more importantly, what I'm trying to do is give you the nuts and bolts yourselves. Any of you who are anyway technical-minded or want to have a go at this, I'm hoping to give you the nuts and bolts, a lot of recommendations on free software and pointers on how you can use the data. The data will be transferred over to Jessica, Irene, or whoever, to the society here. And I'm sure they'd be perfectly happy to share it with anybody who wants to have a go at interpreting the data. Like I say, a lot of the software that I'm going to recommend is either free or it's of a nature that maybe the society might buy it for 99 or 100 euros. I'll go through the costs and I'll go through the different aspects of it. So basically what this is in one way is a little bit like a presentation, part presentation, but in a way also part workshop. The survey parameters were to survey a square kilometre, in other words, just the bare footprint of the hill itself. And the remit was to produce a LiDAR image of the mountain, or of the hill, I should say. But tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the science behind the survey, the way these surveys are carried out. I'll talk about the methodology and the timelines, the way that we carried it out, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, etc. And then most importantly, I'll discuss the data processing techniques, because data is notoriously difficult to process at the level that we're processing it here. if you want to produce just one drawing or one picture, there's a workflow that you can do. But if you want to leverage the real power of that data, you need to delve a lot deeper into the processing techniques and into the software. I'm going to show you then some outputs, and then I'm going to suggest maybe some future survey directions that you might consider, or future work directions that you might consider. Okay, the origin of the project, Jessica again has already explained this. It came about as a result of her having the vision to see that a LiDAR survey would be of great value for this particularly important hill. The importance of the hill can't be overstated. I spent a lot of time on Loch Corrib, and my PhD is on the O'Flaherty's after they were expelled to West Connacht between 1250 and 1650. But I spent a lot of time in the lake looking around me and there is only one significant hill on this side of the lake, and that's Knockma. You've plenty on the other side. You've got all the hills up around Gable, Mount Gable, back around cairns, and Ciarnagira, all the way down the southern Connemara. But what always struck me about being out there in the boat was that there are 3 or 4 very significant cairns that are all intervisible. And the one that's visible here is Knockma. Prominent one on the other side would be cairns on the Glan shore of Connemara, and then Mount Gable would be another one. So the hill was obviously hugely significant, and I often wondered, did the O'Flaherty's look back at these lovely green fields from the wilds of Connemara and think, what have we lost back in Moishola? Anyway, so I'm going to talk about the aerial, the UAS. UAS stands for Unmanned Aerial System, basically drones. We moved away from using the term drones if we can, because it's got these negative connotations, particularly with what's going on at the moment in Ukraine with the war and what's gone on in the Middle East previously. So I'm going to talk about the photogrammetric survey. Now, the photogrammetric survey is not something that I was employed to do, but the camera, while it captures the LiDAR data, also captures photographic data. So it made sense we'd do a photographic survey as well. So we have a 3D model, photographic model of the hill with all the trees on it. We have contour maps. We have digital surface models of the hill as it is without stripping back the vegetation from it, as well as having our LiDAR survey. We have our LiDAR survey then, and then I've also supplied data and visual outputs to the project here. The idea is education and dissemination of information. It's to educate people on how you can use the data that I'm giving you. Because in the past, we've given data to people, and the Discovery Programme, in fact, in Ireland is notorious for this. They produce all this data and it sits somewhere in a data bank and it never gets used, never gets leveraged. Even the project I'm on now at the moment with the Department of Agriculture, when that finishes, there is going to be petabytes of information there, topographical data from every commonage in Ireland. But nobody is going to be willing to pay to store that, and that's going to be lost, the chances are. So hopefully the idea of what I'm trying to encourage in any of these kind of talks or any of this work I do now, I'm trying to encourage people to use the data and leverage the power of the data, because the level of data we have now is immense, and after the winter it'll just be increase exponentially. And the idea then as well of the survey is, of course, to inform future research paths. Okay, the science. The science, basically, you have the emergence of new technologies and survey techniques. Previously, if we wanted to survey Knockma, particularly in its current state, we wouldn't even be able to use GPS terrestrial-based survey equipment, because we wouldn't get GPS signals in underneath the canopy. We would have to go the old-fashioned route, which is what they call a total station, or an electronic distance measurer, or one of these machines you'll see on tripods in roadworks. And that would take us, I would reckon, to get a reasonable survey, 2 to 3 months. We flew this in, I think the flight time I measured, we bounced around the place, so we spent a bit of time talking as well. But we spent, I'd say, about less than 2 hours in the air to do this survey. So the technology, the developments in technology have made this kind of survey very, very rapid and much more comprehensive, the amount of data that we can gather. What's made this possible is the emergence of unmanned aerial systems, or drones, GPS systems, which you've all very rapidly become so accustomed to with our Google phones, for georeferencing our surveys and for placing points in space and time. The cameras and sensors, there's been huge developments in digital cameras and sensors, even since drones emerged in the last sort of decade or 15 years. We've gone from cameras, from using GoPro cameras on sort of homemade drones to now using cameras that are in excess of 100 megapixels. Plus we're mounting things like hyperspectral cameras, multispectral cameras, and LiDAR cameras, of course. There's also been huge advances in IT and computing resources so that we can actually process the level of data that we have. But even now, we're spending on our office PCs, we're spending 15 to 20,000 euros per machine. And some of our machines are struggling to complete a survey in 3 or 4 days, a single survey. So we're still struggling with the amount of data, but we're getting there. The final thing then is the emergence of what's called GIS software, Geographical Information Systems. The principal one here would be ArcMap, which is the one that, say, county councils would use for their planning, TII, all the different public bodies would use. But there is actually a very powerful free version of that I'm going to show you tonight called QGIS, which you can download for free. You can download a load of what are called plugins or bolt-ons onto it that can enable you to process LiDAR data yourself and to visualize it. Drone definition, drone very basically is, it's a flying robot which can be under remote control or can fly autonomously via software controlled flight plans within its embedded systems. And it's working in collaboration with onboard sensors like gyroscopes and IMUs and also the GPS signals to hold its position. You'll be familiar with these sort of consumer drones that emerged about 10 years ago. Very popular one was the DJI Phantom. They were about 1,500 euros. The DJI Mavic still, I think, around 1,000 euros maybe, depending on what model you buy, up to about 2,000 or 3,000 euros. But these drones are limited in their use. They have built-in cameras. They don't have different payloads. They're not really commercial drones. They won't fly in high winds. They won't fly in the rain. They don't have hugely sophisticated sense and avoid systems. So if you fly it into a tree or toward the tree, it will fly into the tree, or people as well. So these aren't the kind of drones that we use in the commercial world anymore. These are the kind of drones that we principally use for surveying now. The one on the right here, I have it here. You can come up and have a look at it later on. It's a DJI Matrice 3000 RTK. It has its own dedicated computer system that comes with it. So we design everything here, basically off the net, on the fly, in the field. We can design all our missions. And when we're finished, we can do it in the office, of course, as well. So frequently I go to work and everything is programmed. I turn this on, I turn that on. I press a button, it goes away and surveys, and it comes home again when it's finished. Comes back if it needs a change of battery. Takes 20 seconds to change the batteries, hot swappable. Don't even take the two out. Land it. Off it goes again, and we fly all day doing this. So they're very efficient systems. They're also very expensive systems, unfortunately. That's that multi-drone. For our larger areas, then, we use what are called hybrid vertical takeoff fixed-wing drones. These take off on their tail, transform into an airplane, and they go away and they survey. The camera alone for that, for LiDAR, is 41,000 at the moment, without the licensing fees. The licensing fees are 10,000 a year. So you're looking at an investment, an initial upfront investment for this system of about 100,000 plus your licensing fees of 10,000 per year. We won't be using that one. I do have it. I have 3 of them actually, but they're not mine, they're the department's. Now, so the one we're using is we used for this survey, it's called the DJI Matrice 300 RTK. RTK stands for real-time kinematic. It means that the drone receives real-time corrections from satellites directly into the drone, and it keeps it centimetre accurate in the air for much more accurate surveys. The advantages of this drone, it has up to a 55-minute flying time. With our LiDAR camera, we were down to about 40 minutes because we have to fly a little slower. So we can cover up to 2 square kilometres in one flight. It carries a standard 20 megapixel camera, but we also mount a 42 megapixel camera on it for mapping, a specialist mapping camera. And it has swappable multiple payloads. So you can actually fly 3 cameras on this at a time if you want. And some of the cameras have 3 different sensors built into them. We can fly. We're restrained in that we're confined to flying what's called VLOS, visual line of sight. The reason for that is we have to be able to see the drone. We have to be able to control the drone because we don't know what's happening over the horizon. We don't want to present a threat, for example, to low-level aerial traffic such as the air ambulance or the Coast Guard or people like that. I do have a beyond visual line of sight license, but it's very, very difficult to use. It takes a huge amount of negotiation with the aviation authority to plan flights. This drone and all its cameras have what are called mechanical versus global shutters. What this basically means is, if you look at this, a lot of cameras used to have rolling shutters. So when the drone is flying along, the shutter is rolling open and closed. Now what this does is, if the drone is flying very quickly, the shutter doesn't roll quickly enough and it produces a jello or a sort of a blurred effect. So all the ones we use now have a total shutter or a global shutter. So they just open and close like a normal camera lens. Okay, cameras and sensors. We have RGB sensors, which are standard photographic sensors. We have thermal sensors now, and we've been using thermal sensors this year in the breeding waders EIP, searching for bird eggs, for example, where we were searching for curlew nests using thermal imaging in the morning, finding the nests, pinging them with a laser, getting the position on Google Earth, going to the nests, taking the eggs, sending the eggs to Photo Wildlife Park where they've hatched, and they're all actually back out in the wild again now. So we actually helped to put an extra 30 curlew back into the landscape this year, because when you take the eggs early in the breeding season, the curlew will actually go and breed again. They'll go and lay again if you get them early enough. So we had, I think we captured, or we found 34 eggs, of which 30 were viable and 29 have survived so far. We also then have multispectral cameras. A multispectral camera measures bands that are not visible to the naked eye. And they're used more for things like measuring vegetational indices, so they can measure the health of crops, for example. So a farmer might use a drone with a multispectral camera on it, fly it over his crops, and it'll tell him where it's stressed and where it's not stressed, what needs fertilizer, what needs water, that kind of thing in the different areas. We've used these on seaweed surveys so far for the most part. And finally then we have the LiDAR cameras. A LiDAR camera is a different thing. It's not really a camera, it's more of a sensor. It's actually sending out 240,000 beams, laser beams per second into the landscape. And the time that takes them to come back gives you a position in space for that particular point. So very, very rapidly builds up a hugely complex picture of the ground underneath it. And a hugely confusing picture, it has to be said as well. Okay, so this is, like I say, this is our examples of our sensor use. Our RGB we're using for farm commonage surveys at the moment with Acres Ireland, who I work for the hen harrier programme in Oranmore. We do huge maps of commonages all over Ireland, and then they go to project officers within the Acres programme, who then assess the quality of that commonage on the ground using our maps as a guide. And then the commonages receive a score and the farmers get a payment based on the quality of their commonage. It's actually streamlined the process and made it much fairer, in that the farmer, previously somebody might have worked their commonage in a W pattern and have missed positive species indicators, for example, whereas our drone survey will identify everything down to single buttercups on the ground. So we get a much more comprehensive survey to start off with, which is still ground truthed by a project officer. Multispectral sensor I've used principally in the past with a company called Aramara Cho, a seaweed company, again for assessing the health and species analysis of seaweeds, where we can't go down into the intertidal area and physically survey those species. The thermal sensors, as I say, we've used it for the breeding waders EIP so far, locating curlew nests, and sometimes, rather sadly, sometimes it's used as well. I work sometimes with people like Civil Defence, Search and Rescue for people who are missing, and thermal sensor obviously is the one you use there. The LiDAR sensor, here obviously we're using it for the Hill of Knockma. So the two sensors we used here are basically an RGB sensor. It wasn't actually the P1 we used. This is the main photographic sensor. We actually used the photographic sensor that's built into this here. This is your LiDAR sensor here, and this is actually a camera then that captures our RGB, or our photographic data as well. Our original remit, based on our quote, was to survey in June 1 square kilometre. That's what was proposed. We then had to get permissions from National Parks and Wildlife to fly over the area, and Eugene, I don't know, is Eugene Finnerty? Yeah, I don't think Eugene is here tonight, no. But Eugene very kindly gave us permission to fly over the hill. Sometimes there can be a problem in nesting season flying drones. We have a problem, for example, with peregrine falcons in Wicklow and cliffs around Knockma Hill and places like that. But thankfully we didn't have any issues here, and I've yet to injure a bird, touch wood. Licensing then, we have the license. We hold all the licenses required from the Irish Aviation Authority, and we hold all the relevant insurances, public liability, that kind of thing. The other thing we are is we're fully GDPR compliant. So we obey basically the same rules that Michael O'Leary would if he flies over you. We can fly over your property. Now, I don't want to fly over people's property. We can fly over your property so long as we don't take off our land on your property. What we can't do is we can't capture any of your personal data. So if we, for example, were doing a survey, I would normally, it's good practice to call into the people or let the local people know what we're at so that they know we're not interested. We're doing a LiDAR survey, we're not interested in photographing their properties. And the other thing we'd do is then if we accidentally captured anything, like a number plate, like somebody's face looking up, that data is destroyed. And also anybody who's concerned about it has the right to request the data if they want to see it as well. There's no, it's totally open. Now, in the end, we ended up doing 2.1 square kilometres of survey because there was just a lot of interesting things going on around the edges. And that's what we could do on the sets of batteries we had on the day. So we ended up coming out back down towards, is it Tom Monaghan's land here? Tim Monaghan's land. Tim very kindly allowed us, I should say thanks to Tim, he allowed us to operate from his land, which saved us a lot of trouble. So we operated from Eamon O'Donoghue also, we operated from Eamon's land on the day as well. He very kindly gave us permission as well. So we were able to operate from the very northern side of the hill here and also from here and survey the hill in two sections divided along the top where the cairn is. Because of visual line of sight, we couldn't survey the hill from one single location. Obviously, we wouldn't see the drone when we went over the hill because I set the drone to terrain follow, which means that the drone doesn't go up and just fly like that. It goes up and it crabs up the hill and crabs down the other side. So we would lose sight of it if we did it just from one location. So we did it from two. Now, processing software, this is where I'd like you to sort of take it. Anyone who's interested in this, just keep an eye on this. I'll give you links, and I'm going to give this presentation to Jessica. I'll put it on her laptop so that the links will work for anybody who has the presentation. When we do the photographic survey, what we do is we take loads of overlapping photographs, very high resolution, but then we need a software that will stitch all of that together and will turn it into a 3D model, one large overall model of our flat representation of the hill, and also then give us outputs like contour maps. We can also animate those models as well and turn them into little short movies. I'll show you one in a moment. I made it in about 20 seconds today. It's not very good, but I can show it to you anyway. Another software that does this and that processes photogrammetry is Agisoft Metashape. Now, these are commercial softwares. They're not necessarily cheap. Agisoft is reasonably cheap. I think you can buy it for under 200 euros. You can buy out a standard license for it. Pix4D is 260 euros per month, so it's not cheap. DJI Terra is a particular software that needs to pre-process the LiDAR data and bring all the different files together. Most LiDAR sensors or cameras have their own proprietary software that does this before you actually do the proper processing of them and map production. For us, it's DJI Terra. QGIS, which is a free GIS or Geographical Information Systems program, we use this for producing our maps, and also it's a very powerful tool for processing LiDAR. As I say, LiDAR is quite difficult, quite tricky to process to produce anything meaningful from it. it's easy to do the pre-processing. It's just a few clicks of the button and you get a lovely, pretty picture of the overall map. But to separate out all those levels into the different classifications, trees and power lines, ground, low vegetation, high vegetation, railroads, anything you wanted to separate out from your LiDAR, that's a lot trickier. And then I'm going to show you just another relatively cheap software that's a nice, easy one to use, and it's based on games technology. It's slightly different. It's not what you'd call the kind of survey you'd use for academic work, but it does give you really nice and pretty visuals. So I'm just going to show you that as well. You can buy a license for that for €99, so it's a relatively cheap one as well if the group wanted to buy it. That actually is an image there from Planlauf terrain, so you can see it's very good at modelling bare earth in certain circumstances. Now, I've given you some links there, so you can look up these softwares yourselves and you can have a look and see if any of them interest you or if any of them are of any use to you. I know at least one person here who's going to be downloading these, so you're very lucky to have her as well. That's Irene. Okay, so photogrammetry. The first thing I did before I even processed the LiDAR, I processed a photogrammetric survey. Photogrammetry is the science of taking measurements using photographs called photogrammetry, and complements the discipline of remote sensing. So it's basically, the real roots of this, I'd say, go back 150 years, but the technology wasn't there to process the data. You'll have seen it in World War II with the camera fighters that they would have sent over Germany to examine the damage that they did. And then you would see the people who interpret that, they would have these massive maps and they'd be looking at them through stereoscopic glasses. That's basically photogrammetry. That's what they were doing, using cameras instead of guns on the fighters to take multiple overlapping photographs. So it's not new technology. What's come along is the technology to process and represent it has come along. The American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing are a body that basically set the rules, if you like, for processing for LiDAR and photogrammetry. And they say that photogrammetry is the art, science and technology of obtaining reliable information about physical objects and the environment by recording, measuring and interpreting photographic images. You can see the root of the world there. Root of the world there comes from light, drawing and measurement. Again, this is just very quickly. The fundamental principle used is triangulation. So if you can produce enough overlapping photographs, you can fix a point, the height of a point and the position of a point in space. And then when you get thousands and thousands and millions, and eventually we have billions of points of data for Knockma, you can process that point cloud, join them all together and triangulate all those points and produce a 3D model. So that's basically what photogrammetry is used for. This is just, again, a representation. You can see here overlapping photographs taken, what are called vertical photographs, take them straight down. Now, that's an example of a 42 megapixel photograph from a graveyard survey in Mulhuddard. Doesn't look like much there, but it's incredibly detailed when you close in on that. You can actually you could read some of the inscriptions on the recumbent stones on that when you close in. The thing with photogrammetry is when you stitch your whole map together, it's lossless in quality. So you get the whole graveyard in that quality, where you can zoom in and you can read the inscriptions on gravestones, literally. So photogrammetry software, as I said, the two that we use, or I normally use, particularly I use Pix4D Mapper. It's the most popular software in the world. You can get a free license for that for 15 days, full functionality, without paying anything. But then it reverts to what's called the discovery version. Now, what that means is you can't process surveys in Pix4D, but I'm giving you the process survey, so you can still use that software to analyze and interpret your data. If you do need it anyway, I can give you a loan of a license. I have a floating license that I can switch between machines. Now, LiDAR. LiDAR is a different beast altogether. LiDAR is an acronym for light detection and ranging. And in LiDAR, laser light or beams are sent from a source or a transmitter and they're reflected from objects in the scene. The reflected light is detected by the system receiver when it comes back. The time of flight is measured. to develop a distance map of the objects in the scene. So if you think about that, we're using a LiDAR camera that gives 3 returns. The one we'll be using in the winter gives 5 returns. It makes sense when you think about that. The return that takes longest to come back is the one that's hitting the ground. So in the processing software, the trick then is to discard the first return, the second return, and just keep the third return. Skim off the rest, and then make our ground model from the third return, because those are the points that are hitting the ground. Now, unfortunately, as I said, LiDAR is not magic. It can't see through solid objects. So we were doing the survey in the summer, so we were limited in the number of ground points that we got this time around, but we will improve on that. I was surprised, actually, the amount of ground points we did get, and it's quite good. I'm happy with it. And I do believe that if we do this again, I would suggest sometime between November and January that we will get a much more comprehensive ground model from it, and a more also given that the camera that has 5 returns this time as opposed to 3. So photogrammetry versus LiDAR. You can see here, photogrammetry, the drone is flying along, picture, 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 back again, overlapping up and down, whereas it's a continuous scan it's actually amazing to watch the remote control screen when you see it. You can actually see the points developing on the ground on your screen as the laser scanner goes along. Incredible piece of technology. Now, the most famous LiDAR survey in Ireland is the Hill of Tara LiDAR survey, which was undertaken with a helicopter in the late 90s. This cost hundreds of thousands. And all that ever really came from it, in a way, is this. Not one single image. They have an image of all the landscape there. But that data has never been fully leveraged or utilized. Like, you can do all sorts of things with this, cutting sections across the landscape, very, very fine, minute topographical analysis of it, but it hasn't really been used. The thing with this was they ruined it for everyone else. This ruined it for me. Because this place was a golf course. It was like that much grass. It was easy. You didn't, in a way, you could argue that you didn't even need LiDAR in Tara because it's just so clean. I'll give you an idea here. If you look at that, that's a photographic survey, and that's the LiDAR. There is a difference, but there's not a huge difference. Like, it is definitely worth doing. But there's not a huge difference in the level of what you can see from photogrammetry to LiDAR in that particular case. Now, the LiDAR sensor we're using is DJI Zenmuse L1 LiDAR sensor. This is a revolution. Most LiDAR sensors that mount on airplanes cost from 50 to 60,000 euros up to maybe 800,000, maybe €1 million. This, and they can't be mounted on drones, they're all far too heavy. This weighs under a kilo, this LiDAR sensor. It retailed originally for 15,000, I think, euros. And it can do an awful lot. It hasn't got all the bells and whistles that your very high-end LiDAR sensors have, but it does the basics, and that's what we really want in archaeology, because what we're really interested in is that ground point model. We're not so much interested in very high resolution of things like power lines or pylons or bridges or buildings. So I'm going to skip through some of this because I know I'm going on a bit. Basically, all you need to know from this is that the LiDAR is throwing out or is gathering 240,000 points per second. So if that's an hour and 20 minutes, that's 3,600 seconds by 240,000 by 2. So you can imagine the amount of points that we gathered. It's a huge amount of data. Now, the data processing, we have to do the pre-processing first with the specific software that's designed for the DJI Zenmuse L1 sensor. This is DJI Terra, and this produces a raw point cloud which is unclassified. So it just basically produces one image of, and lets us know. In some ways, I think it's only really a good quality check as such. It tells us that the LiDAR survey worked. When we go beyond that, then we have to start thinning data. We can't handle the level of data that we have. We don't need it. We don't need every blade of grass because everything just becomes too confused and too blurred and fuzzy, if you like. What we need to do is we need to thin out to maybe 7 or 8 points per square meter and stitch all of that together then. We're still left with hundreds of thousands, millions, sometimes tens of millions of points, and we're not losing anything as such. We're just clarifying things a little bit and making things easier to process. What we do then after we've thinned out our LiDAR cloud is we classify our LiDAR cloud and extract the ground points from that, discarding we don't throw them away, but we don't use them for our further processing. And then at that stage we can produce our visuals. And our visuals are, the useful ones besides the point cloud, are what are called a DEM, a DTM and a DFM. Very simply, that stands for Digital Elevation Model. In other words, a pictorial representation of all the humps and bumps of the landscape. A digital terrain model is the same thing, but with everything stripped off except the ground. So all the buildings gone, as much vegetation as we can get from it is gone. You're just getting a bare earth model. And then a digital feature model, which is a combination in some ways of both. Because sometimes in terms of archaeology, if you strip everything back too severely on your DTM, you'll actually strip monuments off it, which is the very last thing you want to do. So you have to be careful, and there's a question of balance here. Now the final thing is then you have to be able to visualize, and people have to be able to see the information. It's all very well me being able to see it sitting in an office, but you have to be able to show that data in some meaningful form that people can understand, and that they can say, yeah, look, wow, this is here and this is here, and can relate it back to the actual monument itself. And finally then there's interpretation. Now I haven't done any real interpretation on this. I've noticed some stuff, but I haven't interpreted it. And that's something that everybody has to get stuck in on, in a way, because different people will see different things. And we also need to close in on certain areas. We also need to ground truth a lot of the things, because sometimes you could see humps and bumps and you think, oh, this is amazing, I've found something here. I've discovered things like that I think are little possible hut sites. They turned out to be the marks of ring feeders from cattle that have been moved around the field. That's one of the more common ones. You can get to make these kind of errors, so you do have to go back and actually ground truth what you've found. Okay, so when we finished the survey, we came back and I did the pre-processing. So this is your pre-process model of Knockma. So you can see blue here, these blue areas here, lower level areas, but they're also final returns. You're getting a good idea of what the ground is like in that. But you can see the hill itself up in the red and the yellow, the higher areas, all the trees are there. By the way, you're looking over here, you talked about the quarry there. That's the edge of the quarry is there on that side. Happily, I can tell you that the quarry hasn't moved in the last 10 years, in that it hasn't encroached any further into the hill. I checked it there today, and I was looking at Google imagery from 2015, 16, I think it was, and I overlaid the survey on it, and they're still within where they were then in terms of the monument anyway. Now, point cloud classification, again, it's the American Society have decided how points are classified and how the different classes are numbered for our classification. So we classify point clouds according to their characteristics, and the LiDAR point cloud classes that we're looking at are these. This is a very simple LiDAR representation of an airport, and these are the LiDAR classifications. All of our LiDAR points come in originally as never classified. So we just have one big mass of points. Class 1 is unassigned. It's usually where the software is not sure where to put them, whether they're ground points, where they fit. But Class 2 is the real one that we're interested in. Class 2 is the ground. So what we need to do then, as I say, with our point cloud is we need to separate out 0 and 2. So we need to take 2 out of 0 and discard the rest for now. It might have some use. It could have some use to national parks and wildlife, for example, because we can examine things like tree canopy heights, the density of trees. We can even identify and count the number of trees using this data if we want. Now, visualizations. Finally, getting around to visualize, something to see. The visualizations you get from the overall survey, we have single frame photographs, obviously, 42 megapixel, very high resolution photographs. I think we have maybe 1,000 of these vertical photographs of the hill. Welcome to pore over them. It's a very simple process. They're very, very high quality. You can count the stones in the cairns, for example, if you want, if that's what if you had a few weeks to waste. We produced then a full orthophoto, combined photograph of the whole area, the 2 square kilometers. We produced digital surface, digital elevation, and digital terrain models of the unstripped surface from the photography. We also do that from the LiDAR of the stripped surface. And then we can also produce contour maps, hillshade maps. A hillshade map is simply a digital elevation model with the sun modeled from a particular angle and a particular point in the landscape over the model to highlight or cast a shadow, if you like, over the landscape to highlight features in the landscape. Another very important representation then, there's an algorithm that was developed within the QGIS called visualization for archaeological topography. It's a particularly useful visualization that we run, and it highlights or tends to highlight archaeological monuments in our maps. And then the final one is a sky view factor, which it's a difficult one to explain. It's a map designed on how much sky you can see from the point in the ground. It just produces a slightly different effect. All of these different visualizations show slightly different things, so they're all useful in their own way. This is a single frame photograph, for example, and it's not zoomed in, this of the cairn itself vertically down. So like I say, you could zoom in on that, and you could, if you wanted, you can examine and draw every stone from that, if that was your. This is a section of orthophoto. I haven't shown you the overall orthophoto. This is maybe 150 or 200 photos stitched together. But again, the quality is lossless. You're losing no quality in stitching that together. So again, you've got a really good tool for examining the landscape. This then is a digital surface model without any vegetation stripped off it. Again, you can see it's all georeferenced. You've got your scale there, and you've got your heights. The heights here are incorrect for this because I haven't corrected for the height of the drone. So they're actually over by 75 meters, maybe 80 meters. It's very easy to correct it. It's just I didn't do it. I didn't have time to do it today. This is another little cool thing you can do with the Pix4D Mapper software. You can produce a 3D point model, and you can animate that model on the screen. So you can look around the hill, you can look down on the hill, you can look any angle you want, but you can then animate that and export it. Actually, there we go, sorry. All let's do is press return. So you get the idea there. You can see that, and now I just did this in 30 seconds today. I made this just to give you an idea. Again, that's only a point cloud. It's not a photographic representation, but it's a nice little thing to be able to look around the hill. Then we have other visualizations, like we have our contour map here, and you can see some of the features starting to appear here outside of the hill itself. Don't mind the blurry bit in the middle. The blurry bit in the middle is all the tops of the trees. It's taking as contours, but obviously we know they're not contours. This is a photographic map. But we can see here there are a lot of unusual features outside the hill, and these are worthy of being examined again. There are lots of other things we can do now with this as well. For example, this very complicated looking or confusing looking map on the right, nothing to do with archaeology, but we can model the water flow on the hill using these models as well. So we could predict where any drop of water that falls on that mountain, we can predict where it will go all the way to the sea, believe it or not. So it's a very useful tool, this, for, in my own work, for example, for peatland restoration, if we want to either dam up drains or we want to establish drains, that we can know where the water is going to go, what direction the water flow is going to go. Okay, in terms of visualizations now, we're going to move on and just have a quick look at some of the visualizations of the LiDAR. And I'm just going to give you a live view of some of the softwares before I finish as well, if that's okay. In QGIS, what I've done is, just for this talk now, we can do a lot more. I've produced hillshade model, a visualization for archaeological topography, and a sky view factor map of Knockma. This, for example, I can show you this in more detail. It's difficult to see, but you really need to sit down and look at this close up. But this is a visualization for archaeological terrain. So you can see we got quite good penetration through the trees at the top. Where you see the little blobby bits, that's where the LiDAR basically just wasn't penetrating through the tops of the trees. But we got quite a good basic model at the top. We managed to identify things like banks and that within the forest. So that would be one visualization. this is a hillshade model. This one is only lit from one direction. So basically I was saying to you that the way a hillshade works is that you can model it with the sun at a particular angle above the horizon and at a particular angle on the earth. So this is modelled at 315 degrees, so sort of from the north, and it's modelled quite low, and that's quite dark at the bottom. It's modelled at 35 degrees, so it's shooting a shadow very low over the landscape to try and highlight a lot of the archaeology at the north of the mountain. You can see these hollows here. I'm not sure what they are. You can also see that there are older field enclosures here to the north. And actually up here at the top, and unfortunately you can't really see it, but right up there, I've surveyed this 3 or 4 times. There's a huge amount going on up there, possibly related to the schoolhouse that was there, but possibly more ancient as well. And also, if we go to the east of that field there, where we were just sort of losing the survey, there's quite a lot going on there as well that's worthy of further investigation. And I think we will extend out that way. It's only a matter of maybe another 5 minutes flying time next time. This is a bi-directional hillshade, and this is much more useful because what I'm doing now is like you're effectively pretending that there's 2 suns. So there's a sun shining from this way, sun shining from this way, and you're getting an awful lot more detail now. And these are quite unusual, these features here. They could be geological, but they're very, very strange. They look very angular, very, very strange right angles. We're also seeing evidence of a lot of different little structures within the landscape there. But again, ground truthing is going to be the key. Going out and examining these, they could be something as simple as a pit that's been dug 10 years ago. Some of the little, they might be archaeological. We just don't know yet. This is nice here, actually. This is the castle. Is it Finvar's castle?
I think that's
Fecal.
Cashel Fecal, yeah.
It's a ring fort with the remains of a building or a castle possibly within it.
And an enclosure.
There is an enclosure around it as well there.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting and worthy again of possibly doing at a lower level or examining it a little bit further. Okay, that's your software links again. There's the costs. I just put this on it for you. Pix4D, free 15-day trial and then $260 per month for the full version. But you can keep using the free version. It just means you can't process your own aerial surveys or your own data. Agisoft is €179. There's some sort of problem with the resellers of Agisoft that may be related to the Ukraine-Russia war, because Agisoft are a Russian company. I don't know, is there some sort of an embargo on them or, at the moment. QGIS is free to download, and all the bolt-ons, the little add-ins that I use for, they're all free. It's good to give a donation. There's a donation page on it. Give them a few bucks, just you're getting a huge amount of technology for nothing. And then PlanLab Terrain is €99. These are some of the QGIS plugins. I just put this up here for you. These plugins are the ones that will enable you to process LiDAR data. You can't process it just with the QGIS. It's a little bit involved. Irene knows how to do all of this, installing plugins and enabling LAS tools and all the different plugins that you'll need. Principally LAS tools and white box tools. There is another one I've just told Irene about, I've been looking at, called Open LiDAR Toolbox, that at a click of a button produces 6 different maps that are all useful for archaeology. It's designed specifically for archaeology. It's a really clever tool. So that's basically it in terms of the actual presentation here. Now, future survey objectives. Anything that turns up in the LiDAR that when we do examine it in greater details has to be ground truthed. We have to go and look at it, maybe survey it at a lower level at some stage. Whether I do that or whether you do it yourselves with your own drones. I don't know, there's probably a few people at least in the room at this stage that own their own drones. Further LiDAR survey, Jessica mentioned it to me and I didn't see it for a while. You mentioned possibility of Loch Hackett in a text to me. We might look there when we have the uprated camera that day. We'll try and do both. Winter survey is the way to go if we can do it. Publications and signage, obviously, eventually that maybe we might be able to use some of the outputs from this in public signage boards at the hill so that people can see. I don't know what your plans are. It's not.
That's what actually Eugene Finnerty was suggesting,
Perfect.
so that's really good.
Brilliant. And any suggestions you have yourself of what can be done with this data. Now, I'm going to show you just very quickly, and I'm conscious now I'm keeping you here maybe too long. I'll show you very quickly the software itself and what it looks like. So I'll show you, let me see, Global Mapper. This is one I didn't talk about. That's Global Mapper, that's your Global Mapper. The reason I didn't show you this one, it's quite an expensive software just to buy the bare bones LiDAR module. It's about €1,000. But it's quite a clever, you can see here actually, the reason I put this up is you can clearly see here, that's the edge of the quarry there, and it hasn't moved from the previous extent, because that map that's underlying this here, the world topography map, is about 10 to 15 years old, so we know that they're not encroaching. This is quite a clever tool. I think I gave Irene a copy of this. Damn. Yeah, we'll get that to you. Yeah. Yeah, this also produces very nice, well, not very nice, but very useful contour maps. So you can see the contour map there. The real one, though, that we use is this one. This is QGIS with all the plugins. So you can see here, we have different visualizations here generated on the side. And they're quite easy to generate once you have all the plugins properly installed. And just very quickly go through these, actually. That's the bidirectional hill shade model, and that's not exaggerated, so it's the actual scale. It's the same again, I think. That's a slope analysis model. Another visualization that is very useful for looking at things like contours, and again, it really enhances these very strange looking features here that appear to be, very strange angles, right angles, bending in and out. Don't know what exactly they are, those banks. And also it sort of gives us a much better idea of the terracing here. By the way, I know that the forestry here is being cut. Unfortunately, although it was hand dug, the surface would still have been disturbed on it, so it's unlikely you're going to find anything in underneath the trees there, where the trees formerly were. So they're the kind of visualizations we're getting. Then I'll just give you very quickly, yeah. This is planned out terrain. This is a photographic model. And the reason there's a hole in the middle of it, the black hole there, is that when I was flying the drone over the wooded area, the wind was blowing very gently. But once the wind blows, what it does is it means that the overlapping photographs no longer match, because the leaves aren't in the same place when it flies back and takes the photographs that it needs to match those. So wind can be your enemy in terms of measurements for photogrammetry. But this model actually...
how far can you zoom in on those?
How far do you want to?
I want to see things.
Okay, give me a look.
Show me the gold coins.
I'll move this up. Look for something interesting. This isn't LiDAR, by the way. This is photogrammetry. So
Those things.
yeah. Not really sure what they are, but we should examine them, I think, just to. Just change that color, sorry.
And all of the earthen mounds that are running through kind of the middle are under that tree foliage, aren't they?
The banks.
The banks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we might get those during winter.
Sure. But that's basically it. I hope now that you're not discouraged that we didn't find a huge amount of new monuments as such, but it's the beginning of a process, really. And what's very important here is that the archaeology is recorded as it is now. if you like, a snapshot in time, that we have that amount of data that we can examine. And it informs future studies and future research then as well. Hopefully we will get a more detailed model again then at some stage in the winter. Thank you. Sorry, by the way, if anyone wants to have a look at the flight programmer and how the thing works, I can show you here, I can turn that on. Or you're welcome to come up and have a look at the drone itself. And if you have any questions or anything.
While you're having a peep at the drones and other stuff around the room, I'd like to say a few thank yous. Special thank you to Paul and Jessica for their wonderful presentations. Thank you all for coming out tonight. There's a cup of tea in the back, thanks to Chrissy for organising the stuff at the start, and Vinny and Paddy for getting the hall ready and for getting everything that you see, your seating, your screen, etc. So a sincere thank you to Vinny and to Paddy. As Jessica said, thank you to the GF for the wonderful facility, the hall, and I hope you enjoyed the very informative talk from Paul and from Jessica, and Irene is very much in it as well. A particular thank you, I think, to our Secretary Claire, who has done marvellous work. So with that, unless there's any other questions and you want to have a peep at the stuff, tea will be ready in about 2 minutes. Thank you.